Mr. John Speed.
It's been a hot second. How you doing, Jonathan?
It's good. How are you?
Good. All is well.
How's Chain Guard?
It's good.
Yeah.
It's fun and interesting. Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
I don't know if I've talked to you since you actually officially started. I don't know if are you Alpha and Omega, something else? I'm not sure how to categorize you, but
I work for the Linux Foundation. I am a part of the Open Source Security Foundation staff. I work for but yes, I'm part of Alpha Omega, predominantly
cool.
security researcher for Omega.
Okay, Roger. Cool.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And Michael Scovetta, who's still joining, is one of the two managers I need to keep happy to keep my job. Actually, well, three technically, now that Amazon has funded the project. So yeah. Yeah. Hello, Michael.
Howdy, folks.
Hey, folks. Sorry, I'm late. Still trying to get situated from travel last week. Give me one
Welcome back.
second. Thank you. Let's see. Trying to get things on here. So we have Bruno. I don't see Mike or Jay, but I'm sure that they will soon. Give me a project. Yeah, there's Mike. Hey, Mike, if you can hear me.
Yep, can hear you.
And then I don't see an agenda for today, but I remember Isaac saying he added something to the agenda.
Yeah,
so...
I put them in the I put some items in the agenda corral at the top of the kind of for next time section. I didn't want to presume to put them on the I didn't want to presume to put them on the actual agenda.
Got it. Yeah, I see it now. Okay, so let me just create.
And Malba, John Speed and I had something as well. We didn't know.
Yeah,
where to stick it in.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, again, apologies. Normally I would have this set up right before, but still trying to catch up with all the craziness that has happened.
Were you on vacation?
I was not. I was in New York for some training and then mingling with executives.
Oh, right. Well, I can see how one might need a while to recover from that.
Yeah. So it was quite the event. Very much enjoyed it. But I definitely am still recuperating from all that mingling. I'm not a mingling kind of person. It takes a lot out of me. So to be on all the time is just, let's see. Okay.
I totally hear you.
Let's see. See, virtual, I'm okay. I'm okay virtually. In person is a different story. Okay, so agenda, it sounds like Isaac, you had one. Well, where's yours? I see it now. And then Tracy, you had one. Where's yours, Tracy? I can't. Did you write it on here? No. Okay.
It's my name. That's the salsa plus one, Tracy, and I like that.
Okay. So let's do that one. And then there's this. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of those two from up here. And then before we start those, I would like a quick update from Mike, Jay, Bruno from last week. But I do want to say congrats to the team that we got 2 accepted talks for OSSNA Vancouver. We got 2 waitlisted and 1 declined. So I still consider that it's a success.
Absolutely.
That's great.
So,
super great.
yeah, so now it's just hoping that someone drops out so that our waitlisted stuff makes it. So we'll see.
And I'll
but-
just throw in the OpenSSF call for papers is still open as well, OpenSSF Day.
Yeah, I think the deadline's is Friday. So we'll have to talk about that towards the end, because I know we have a lot going on with the blogs and stuff. Update, and then I'll put that at the end. And then OpenSSF Day CFP. Okay, so Jay, Mike, Bruno, can you give a brief update from last week? And
Sure. So there was a bunch of one second here. So there was a bunch of updates regarding some of the blogs. Some of them had actually, I believe, had gone out already.
Yeah, I think the what's new was more of
Yes.
There might be deltas from the
Okay.
comments that we receive, and so then we're gonna have to update the what's new blog.
Okay.
Yeah.
So beyond that, so there didn't seem to be a lot of folks who had progress on some of the other blogs. I know that there was some folks who were still doing research and doing some of that sort of stuff. So I have a draft that I'm still working on, which I still have a blog here for which hopefully folks can see it. It's once again, it's still very, very early on.
Okay. Yeah, if you can put a link. I know for
Yeah,
folks on the call.
Yeah, who might not be able to see the chat.
Yep.
Okay, so let me put that.
I'm gonna copy this table back up
Okay.
so that way people can see it. Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen.
No, you're not.
I'm so out of touch right now. So, like I said, I'm all over the place. I think you can see.
Yeah. I don't know.
You're seeing too much, but now you can see less. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I have I just posted it. Oh yeah, it's already actually in there. Okay.
Yeah, it's
The
in
breadth
there.
and depth is also. So yeah, so I'm still working on it. I think I'm taking it's hard because I also need to help out with the salsa specification and some of the other things. There seems to be, I think one of the things that's growing a little concerning for the release is there still seems to be a lot of pretty serious confusion around some of the definitions around salsa, around why we, for some folks, either we have made it too restrictive, and for other folks, we've opened it up where salsa is not particularly effective. And I think both of those are misconceptions. I just think we need to do a better job at really making sure that the definitions are crisp and clear and that the intentions are crisp and clear. And so things we need to do a lot more to do that. So for example, some of the definitions around isolated and ephemeral are causing confusion. A lot of folks who sort of think that, and I think it's a misconception, but they're thinking that, there's whispers of like, hey, have we made salsa too easy? Specifically so that certain companies can look like they fully adopted salsa and they're good, and you're not actually hitting some of not actually stopping supply chain attacks. I think, and to be clear, I don't think that's actually the case. I think it's a misconception. And I think with that said, though, that misconception can lead to folks saying, yeah, well, I'm salsa compliant because my interpretation of isolated and ephemeral is this thing.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to be very crisp and clear on definitions.
So, is this blog part of, which one is it? Is it this one right here?
Yeah, so that's two.
Also tracks?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, and that one is mostly just around stuff like, why are we splitting up salsa? or, why is salsa split up into those different tracks? And more or less just sort of saying, oh, the reason why is the build is super important. And we believe that source is just a separate set of things that you want to make sure is clear and consistent. Whereas the build, you just care that is what I pulled in, what I said I was going to pull in, right? Even if that thing is nefarious, right? You had the whole point of salsa provenance is you are establishing provenance. You know where that thing came from. So if it didn't do the right things, then you could always go back and you're not running into a situation like the solar wind sunburst where they thought they were building the right source code, but it turned out they were linking to something that was malicious, and they had no way of actually seeing that.
Okay, so I know these two are very, they're talking about similar things, and I've not started anything since I was on a work travel last week. I don't know if Chris K is on, but I know that this is something on my to-do list and Chris K, so we'll have to coordinate to make sure that this was specifically about diving deeper into build and source. So maybe yours is more higher level, but we'll definitely want to sync on that. So I completely forgot. Apologies, folks. Normally we do the welcome newcomers. So if there are newcomers that would like to speak, feel free to chime in now.
I think we
I'm somewhat of a newcomer.
I think Andres has his hand up earlier. Andres,
Oh,
you
I'm
still got something to
sorry.
say?
I'm sorry. I didn't see the hand. Apologies.
That's all right. I also consider myself sort of a newcomer, although I've been in near orbit or on the periphery of things for some time. Hello all. I wanted to chime in to what Michael was saying. I wonder if, Mike, some of it is a function of what we discussed during the spec call yesterday. Of there's the perception from people seeing 1.0 that, oh, this is done and it's ratified. And they're putting a lot of energy on, we need to form a solid understanding of these definitions and live by them. I wonder if it's a function of, well, this is evolving and this is subject to get more refined over time. And that could be what you're writing here, or that could be a roadmap, a public roadmap with midterm and long-term horizon. Even going back to the discussion around, well, how do we convey big changes of definitions? Is it, do we bump a major version of salsa? Do we do minor versions? And people are going to scramble when these come. So in order to front load or preload what is expected to change, I wonder if an artifact, not quite a vision, not quite a roadmap, but in between, obviously with the proviso, these are forward-looking statements, and what gets cut within a quarter might change. But yeah, just from the end user perspective, so there's like less cognitive overhead around or attaching too close to what things are called today. That's that.
So Jay, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hands up, but more newcomers first, and then I'll chime in on what we're talking about here.
I can say something as a pseudo newcomer. I've hung around OpenSSF a little, but my name is John Speed Myers, and I work at ChainGuard. And I've never been to this particular group before. So nice to meet you all.
Welcome. Thanks for coming. Anybody else?
Yep, I'm also new to the group. I just joined Active State, and so Active State has been hovering around the secure supply chain and compliance space for 20 years. So I thought it was time that we jumped in to work with you guys. Great to meet you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Like that.
Anybody else? And thank you for keeping me honest, Jay. Sometimes I look down and I'm not looking at the screen with the hands raised. So go ahead, Jay.
So to add to that, right? So I think a large part of that is to make sure that with respect to salsa build, that we differentiate what's considered evolution of those specs, right? 1.0 versus 2.0, and I think we were talking about something like that yesterday. But then when we come out to source is a whole new 1.0. Because I think what happens is, especially with what I'm hearing, is people are assuming. This is one of the comments I made early on. I made this comment maybe a couple of months ago about this, saying, hey, we split these things up. We're coming out with 1.0, and I made a comment. I think I made a comment inside of the blog that said, well, if I'm a consumer of this, and you're telling me that you split up between source and build, and you got the 1.0, what happens if when we come out with source, or if we come out with something else, it's going to change dramatically what now constitutes meeting level 1 or level 2 or level 3, right? How do I trust the spec now to do what it says it's going to do if by me saying I've met level, if I use version 1 and I met level 1, well, version 2 comes out or source comes out, and that's supposed to be an evolution to build. Now, am I no longer in compliance? I think we need to do due diligence in separating these two. Build is one salsa track, source is another salsa track. You can have version 1 or version 2 build. You can have version 1 source. It can be very confusing, but I think we do the work to make sure we parse these things out so that they're understood that, hey, just because you meet one does not mean you meet the other. You still need to do work and due diligence to meet the other, or maybe the other doesn't apply to you at all. Maybe what applies to you is just the build, right? And we do our best effort to organize our thoughts and deliver that kind of message, or communicate that appropriately, so that those that are consuming this are consuming the right ones when they need to consume it. I mean, that's my 2 cents. And anyway, and please, if I'm not understanding, I'm sure somebody else will chime in and add a little bit more color.
Yeah, and in a way you have expressed this before with transitive identities, transitive dependencies, and leaving those out of scope. At one point, like Mike, you remember saying, well, we can't solve all the things right off the bat. So we have to start off with what is feasible. But again, from a consumer perspective, people are going to be, tell me what I need to know upfront that is expected to change. So it doesn't, like, analogous to Kubernetes is a full-time keeping up with API changes and what's new and what has changed. So lowering that burden.
So Mike, you have your hand up.
Yeah. So actually, one of the things, I think that it would be worthwhile is to kind of, we need to clarify, a meta issue for salsa that we need to kind of clarify is, stuff like what to expect between versions, so that folks understand, like, if I'm on version 1 and a minor release will update these sorts of things, a major release will update these sorts of things, and this is what folks should expect. And then at the same time, also, I think we really need to make sure that we're crystal clear with, hey, 1.0 is designed right now, I think, to like, once again, like, this is an actual example here. Based on a lot of our conversations, 1.0 is designed to hit certain attacks against the build, right? It doesn't prevent folks from ingesting bad source code or bad dependencies, but what it does do is, if you're a high salsa level, like salsa level 3, you should have increased confidence that, yes, your build built something malicious, because we can go back and look at those dependencies or look at that code and know that, yeah, it pulled in the wrong source code. Whereas if you're only on salsa level 1, then you can't really be sure that what's being reported is actually accurate and wasn't tampered with, similar to something like a Sunburst style attack where it pulled in the right source code, but then the build was actually compromised, and so it thought you were linking against this library, you ended up linking against a different one.
I see.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I think this is, I agree with everything that's been said, and Jay and Mike certainly, like, I think providing some clarity around where this thing is going, I think is the theme of what I'm hearing, and where we are today, what you can expect to get from where we are today, and then what you can expect over the next 6 to 12 months, say. And so, at the top of the year, I shared this document about, hey, here's a a proposed vision for this working group, for the SCI working group, and that laid out exactly this kind of what I was hoping to get alignment on with respect to kind of where are we going, and if we can get agreement in the SCI working group around the vision in the document, we can start communicating about this externally. And the one of the things the document was proposing was, hey, SALSA is starting with some set of concerns that we're beginning with, and right now it's build and provenance. We expect to expand that set of concerns over time, and as Jay said, hey, source will be coming over time. I would like us to get agreement on, hey, dependencies will be coming over time, and what we'll do there is we'll say there's all this great work on S2C2F. Well, let's fold that into SALSA too, and let's have that become the SALSA dependencies track, and let's start unifying on a consolidated roadmap for supply chain integrity in the OpenSSF. And our vanguard, our marquee framework here is SALSA. We have a great base to build on at 1.0. We've got build and provenance covered. Source we took out of scope. Let's pull that back into scope for a subsequent version. Let's add dependencies in a subsequent version. Let's start talking about vulnerability management in a subsequent version. But I think that a precursor to be able to articulate the future is broad agreement in this group about what that future looks like. And that's what I was trying to get at with the vision doc, which I shared back at in the end of December. And so I realize there's a whole bunch of open comments in that doc, which is on me to kind of go and start processing and resolving. But if I would love to start to get a consensus in this group around, broadly, we consider directionally that enriching SALSA over time with additional tracks or additional sets of concerns, and going down that list in priority order is where we're going as a team. And we will layer in source, we will layer in dependencies, we will layer in vulnerability management, whatever that may be. If we can get agreement on that, then we can start articulating to consumers, here's where we are today, here's what you can expect in 6 to 12 months, and here's what you can expect in 24 to 36 months. And I think, if people are nodding along with the document and where this is at, we can begin to communicate that today.
Totally. One thing real quick, just not to ignore misconceptions, is you probably want to be very clear on SALSA is going to be more defined by the things you say no to. So yes, the future, but based on what you know today. Still, there are a lot of things that are NP problems, just things that computer science hasn't tackled. So being very clear on these things are not at all in scope because we just don't know how to solve them as an industry. It's probably important to tackle those misconceptions. And yeah, no matter how things are going to evolve, just from a unless you constrain the problem, you're not gonna ever get to solving the provenance of your silicon and the sand that's making up your silicon.
Totally. No, I love that too. And I would come back to the doc, and I think the doc covers that with respect to outlining what is the charter and mission and where are the boundaries of that. Because to your point, the last thing you want to do is have something that's so expansive, everything is conceivably in scope. I'm sorry, Melba, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't raise my hand when I'm sharing. So I did put the link to the doc that Isaac is talking about. I also put a link to the roadmap that we had started. We got feedback on it. We haven't finished it, but I think the terms about, or the comments about communicating out to the community, this is where we're going, that vision, I think is going to be important for that 1.0 release. It's what it seems, but I do want to be mindful of time because there are several things on the agenda. So is there any last comments on this before we move on to the next thing?
Yeah, just one. I mean, Isaac's points is sound there. I think that the collaborative efforts and the nature around all the things we're doing, especially at a higher, at the larger working group level, man, these things are all things that we do need as a team to drill down on, so that this group, this SIG, has even more of a tight foothold on how we're presenting to the community at large these efforts. So I'm right there with Isaac. I will say that what shape that takes, I think that's a larger discussion. But I do think the shape needs to be discussed, and we do need to begin to narrow that focus down a bit so that we have a more of a solid direction. So plus one on part of that.
Okay. So I'll try to write down some action items, and then we'll go back to see if people agree. But Isaac, I don't want to take up time. If you wanted to share your screen or share something, feel free.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the next item, I mean, there was an active and an encouraging thread on the mailing list last week, and Jennifer Bly, who I think has joined us this week as well, is going to, run point on kind of, hey, let's establish a center of gravity around communicating SALSA 1.0. That's an OpenSSF announcement, and then there's a constellation of companies around that who want to, echo the core message on their owned and operated properties. And so I've kind of sketched out this comms plan, shared in the mailing list, and I'm anticipating Jennifer kind of running with much of this. But what I'd proposed in terms of responsibilities is I think it's probably this group's responsibility to establish what are the core talking points? Like if there are 3 key messages we want to deliver alongside the SALSA 1.0 mailing list, what are those 3 key messages? And from there we can go, okay, how do we land this message, with audience X or audience Y in long form? And that's where, we expand to have the OpenSSF blog post and the surrounding constellation of comms and press briefings and so on. But I have not seen anywhere yet a bullet list of what are the key messages that we want to land alongside 1.0. And so I thought I'd bring it to this group. I don't have anything more than that empty placeholder right now. Of just kind of, I can propose what I think they are, but that would be awfully presumptuous of me. And I don't want to do that. I think that, I don't know whether we want to do it live in this group today or whether we want to take it offline and try and get it done async in Slack and Docs by the end of the week or something. But time's pressing as we come to 1.0, and I think that we really need to lay that groundwork of what are the, what's the core set of messages that we want to communicate alongside 1.0.
So I'm wondering if this is kind of what this table is. A couple weeks ago, we said, okay, we want to communicate things like, why are we breaking up build versus source, right? We want to talk about the tracks, the what's new. There's something out there, but we need to edit it based off of anything we change. But then additionally, there is some SCI blogs, right? What's the difference between, SALSA provenance versus, MBOM, SPDX, blah, blah, right? There's a lot of questions usually around that. So I don't know if this is what you're referring to, or if you're thinking something different.
I think it's to me. I'll go just quickly, Jennifer, and I think to me, it's more about acknowledging that this SALSA 1.0 com may be the first time someone has heard about SALSA. They may come to this blog having never heard about SALSA before. And when SALSA was initially launched 2 years ago, supply chain was not as current a concern. I mean, it was a concurrent concern amongst a caucus set of folks in the know, but now it is everywhere, and everywhere has thoughts and concerns and ideas about supply chain security. But I think that there's an element in which, yes, we should talk about what happens to build and what happens to the tracks and why do we descope, but it feels to me like more fundamentally than that, there's like bullet number 1 of our core message could be OpenSSF has launched SALSA 1.0. This is an important milestone towards X, Y, and Z, and here's why you should care about it. And it's really starting from that groundwork. Like for someone who's never heard about SALSA before, has heard about it now because there's the 1.0 launch and there's a lot of noise about it, and they just want to understand how it fits in. Sorry, Jennifer.
Sorry, this is Tracy. I'm just going to say something quick and then I have to jump to another meeting. But yeah, totally agree. I think you're speaking to the world who've never heard of SALSA before and just being crystal clear on it's a framework for supply chain security and integrity, and just hitting why people should use it and the fact it includes provenance, which I don't think comes across when you first come across it, but just the qualities, like it's practical, it's actionable. I think all that's good stuff, but keep it very high level. And with that, this is awesome, but I gotta jump.
Okay, thank you for joining. Jennifer?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Yeah, thank you so much, Isaac, for getting us going with this document, the comms planning. I think it's really helpful. And I think it'd be really great to get from this group, in addition to sort of those overarching key messages and main goals, kind of what's the call to action? Like what do you want people who are learning about this maybe for the first time to do? And kind of thinking about that and how we can incorporate that into our all of our messaging around this.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm wondering, oh, Isaac, you have your hand up, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to have my hand up.
Okay,
But I mean, I'll just emphatic agreement with Jennifer there in terms of like crafting a call to action. What do we want people to do? They've read about the Salsa 1.0 launch. What now?
So I'm wondering about this, it's going to depend on the persona. And so that's why we started a developer persona to coincide with the 1.0 launch. Is like, as a developer, why do you care about Salsa? Right? What's in it for you? I'm not sure if you can have a call to action for an all-inclusive audience, because it depends on what it is that you are doing. Are you trying to check off a box? Are you trying to incorporate it into your build? Are you trying to verify? So I'm kind of not sure on that one. And I see hands up, Isaac.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so I think, I mean, in the comms plan, like step number one, which I have there in terms of goals, is literally like, which audiences are we trying to reach and with what result? Like, I have not seen that written down anywhere. We probably have our own answers to that question, but I think that we need to get agreement on exactly that. And from there, we go to, okay, what are the core messages, given that we want to reach these three audiences? I mean, I think developers is one part, but to be honest with you, I think that actually at this stage, getting to a 1.0, tool makers is a massive constituent that's super important. Like Salsa is going to live or die based on the support it has in the tooling ecosystem. And so there should be a call to action for, hey, you make a build system, you make a CI/CD system, you make an admission control policy controller. Like there's a whole tooling ecosystem in supply chain that we need to be speaking to too, because adoption is going to rely on those people essentially implementing support for Salsa up and down the supply chain. And so I think, yes, there's a message for individual developers. What is Salsa? Why should you care about it? There's a message for tool owners. There's a message for CISOs. There's a message for DevOps people. And so I think, you know, within the comms plan, like it's being crisp on who are the audiences we're trying to reach and what are we trying to get each to do. From there, we can go, okay, how do we best effect that result? And so I don't know, I was trying to lay this out in the comms plan. I guess where I'm at right now is if we all agree that this is a reasonable framework to approach this 1.0 comms, the question becomes, how do we put flesh on these bones? Like who's responsible for writing the list of who are the audiences we care about? Is that Jennifer? Is that Melba? Is that Jay? Is that me? Is that this group? Because with 2 or 3 weeks to go, we don't have much time on it.
So Marcella, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I first of all totally want to agree with what Isaac was saying about including very specifically targeting tool makers, tool owners, sysadmins, people who will actually be implementing Salsa, developer in a Salsa level 3 build, right, which is mostly automated. Developers shouldn't really be interacting with Salsa very much, right? And so maybe even laying out the different how different people interact with Salsa or use Salsa on the different levels might be a good way to try to clarify some things. But the reason I raised my hand originally was actually to sort of push back a little bit on this, on labeling Salsa sort of just generically for software supply chain integrity, because Salsa is targeting build right now with the 1.0 release, right? And so I think that's going to cause more confusion if we're not specific about what it is that we're targeting. So that was kind of just my comment. I think that's exactly what people have been struggling with as well. Isn't SBOM also for supply chain security? And they're both for supply chain security, but in very different ways, right? And so if we can articulate that, I think that might help people. So.
Arno?
Yes, hi. So I just wanted to follow up on this persona and point out that the specification actually kind of defines a few of those, right? It talks indeed about build systems, and so that's the primary target is. And I think developer is too generic a term, because if you're a developer of a build system, then that definitely is something you should worry about. But there's also the consumer people, right? So in the Salsa spec, I think I can identify at least three audiences. There's the build maker, build system, and the consumers, and in between there's like the package manager or package ecosystem.
Can you repeat those for me, Arno? Sorry.
Yeah, build system, package manager / ecosystem, and the consumers. These are like clearly talked about.
Attestations?
Yeah, of the provenance.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's this one. Okay.
Yeah. And so these are clearly talked about in the spec. Maybe others can tell me if I'm missing any others, but those three are clearly identified in the spec today.
Yeah, I like that, and I particularly, I mean, I was put my hand up in the middle because I was going to throw in package managers, and then you did. I think package managers is a critical audience that we've got to speak to, and I think it was to Claudia's point, or I forgot who mentioned it, but like ultimately, we might expect and aim for Salsa to just disappear, and it just fades into, it becomes part of the accepted and taken for granted infrastructure in the same way that I use npm install today. I don't wonder whether it's using SSL to do its network comms. I just assume that it is, and it's taken care of. npm install in 3 months' time will also be doing Salsa provenance verification. And I won't have to think about that either. I won't have to implement the verification itself. My tool set will just kind of understand this natively in the same way that I expect my tool set today to do the right thing when it comes to network layer comms. And so I think that like looking at that as the ultimate outcome, like in the short term, we might expect individual developers to think and care about Salsa, but in the long term, Salsa should just kind of melt into the infrastructure and disappear in the same way that, for most people, thinking about SSL is not something they do every day. It's just it's a vital part of what they rely on every single day, but they never really think about it too hard. I think of Salsa the same way.
And then Claudia?
Yeah, I was just going to throw out there, if there's anything that we can use for context or a specific scenario, that usually helps too, right? So I don't know if something like the executive order mandate for cybersecurity or anything that's coming down that's real, that we can say, hey, this is how Salsa would apply in this specific scenario. If you are a developer, if you are a CISO, if you are a DevOps manager, this is how Salsa could help you with something like the executive order mandate. And actually put it into more of a real life, this is happening right now, and this is how far it can get you with something like a national compliance issue.
Yeah, we have an existing blog. It's an older one that would have to get updated. I'm looking for it. For some reason, I don't see it on here. Where we do call out the executive update, and we do call out NIST, SSDF, and et cetera, and we would just need to update it based off the current spec, and so that might help with that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we might want to also coordinate with some of the folks from CISA on that, because CISA actually cites SCVS as well as Salsa as things to take a look at when securing the supply chain, and so they've already done some of that on the other end of saying, hey, because there's this executive order and yada yada, you should look at things like Salsa, and we should cite some of their stuff as well. I'll send a let me post a link in the let me post a link in chat. I'm having issues with Google Docs today.
Okay, I see what is this this Google Doc, I'm sorry, that you have up here at 11:07. That must have been the meeting notes. I'm just looking at the notes now, sorry. I see it now. Yeah, the developer ones. Yeah, and I know the NIST SSDF has a reference to Salsa in the examples. So I do know that it's being referenced right now in different places. Let me do this. Okay, Isaac?
Yeah, I was just gonna, we had 10 minutes on this. We've got other things on the agenda. Like, I just wanted to come back to, and I guess Jennifer can probably guide us to. Jennifer, what specifically do you need from this group in order to make progress on Salsa 1.0 comms? Is it talking points? Do you have talking points? Is it suggested audiences? Is it like, I guess, like, my interest is in making sure that we have great 1.0 comms to go alongside the release. And it feels to me like there's a bunch of stuff we need to get done, and I'm just not clear on exactly how to actuate that work, like who's going to be doing it and on what schedule. And so maybe Jennifer, you can guide us with respect to what are you blocked on, and what can the SCI positioning working group help with in order to unblock you?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I think the best people to write and really describe what it is and what's happening and why it's important and why you should care is really the folks in this group. So I'd love if we could work together on coming up with those key themes, the messaging, even the goals, like what is it for each key audience that we're trying to achieve. And I think that kind of clarity, then I am happy to take it from there and work on the distribution plans. I'd like to set up a meeting with some of the organizations involved to help get quotes and, if there's any testimonials, that kind of thing. So I think kind of just working on those basics would be really helpful.
Wonderful. So I think, in that case, probably coming out of this meeting, there's an action for us all to dive into the Salsa 1.0 comms plan doc. And I see, Melba, you've been adding some stuff as we go there, and just like throw stuff in there. Like, there's literally placeholders for goals and audience and key message and what results do we want and what next action do we want people to take. And I think that we just need to kind of gather people from this team over the next few days to literally throw stuff in that doc. Jennifer and I can help, synthesize, distill it down, accept comments in the doc, and so on as we go. But it feels like that's probably the right venue to centralize this work in. Jennifer, does that sound right to you?
Yes, definitely. That would be much appreciated.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Melba.
Thank you. Okay, Isaac, you still have the next one too.
Oh my goodness. You know what? In the interest of time, this isn't an urgent item, and so we can put this back in the holding item and come back to it, because I do want to make sure that we get to John and Tracy. Actually, Tracy's gone. Maybe it's just John.
John, are you still here?
I'm still here. I think Tracy has left.
Yeah, she did. Are you able to present without her? Or do you want to present with her?
No, I can present without her.
Okay. Do you want to share something?
Sure. Let me share my screen just a second. Okay. Can you see anything? Perhaps it says Salsa++ survey. Let me click one more button and see if I can make it in slideshow. Okay. Still seeing it?
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you.
So I wanted to present the results of a software supply chain security survey that focused mostly on Salsa related security requirements, not all of Salsa, but a portion, and some other things, other software supply chain security related security items that a number of organizations, myself and ChainGuard, Tracy, the Eclipse Foundation, the Rust Foundation, and OpenSSF big shout out to Jennifer Bly, but others too, conducted last summer and fall of 2022. And I think some of it bears and will be of interest to the salsa community writ large and anyone interested in salsa. So Jennifer asked myself and Tracy to come and present it because she thought, rightfully so, that it would be of interest and potentially useful too, especially for deliberations over the release candidate for salsa. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about this survey, and hopefully it's at the very least interesting. Glad to answer questions, and I know we're a little short on time. I'll try to finish by Eastern time, something like 12:53. Take a few questions, and I can always talk on Slack with other interested parties or over Google Meet or whatever you would like. So I'm John Speed. I think I mentioned this, but I work as a researcher at ChainGuard in their R&D lab. And if Isaac already has a question, I'm glad to answer it.
I think it's leftover hand up.
Okay.
Isaac.
Okay, cool.
Isaac, do you have a question, or is that leftover?
Okay. Well, I'm glad to answer it later too, Isaac. So the first question you might have is, why do a survey on salsa and these practices? What's to gain? And I really had a very simple motivation. I think another partners did about a year ago, which is when this started, April and May of 2022, which is how widely practiced are different software supply chain security practices? It's a pretty simple question. It's actually surprisingly difficult to answer. It's gotten a little easier over the past year. In tandem with this survey, there's been some others that I'll mention that have helped shed light on this. And there's a couple other questions that I thought were of interest, and the salsa community has been wrestling with them, which is how useful, how much do participants, software professionals, think these different practices are useful or not, and how easy or hard are they perceived to be? So it seemed like a nice step. There's so many other questions to answer too, but a nice step would be answering those questions at a minimum. So that's what we did. So we asked a number of questions. I'll show you, not all of them, but a few of them. On the prevalence, helpfulness, and difficulty of 10 software supply chain security practices. Seven of them come from salsa. 3 of them are not in salsa, at least not right now. And I'll be very clear, since this was done last summer in fall, we were focused on version 0.1. So of course, we had no magic ball. We weren't trying to predict what salsa 1.0 would be. We just went with what is available. So we had 167 respondents. We gathered them largely through the professional networks of the organizations I mentioned. It's certainly not representative in the statistical sense. There is no list of software professionals that one can simply sample from in traditional survey sampling. But I'll show you one more slide and I'll say a little bit more. We tried to make sure it wasn't all salsa enthusiasts and supporters. You'll see here that 30% or so, a little bit more, had never even heard of salsa before taking the survey. And there are a wide range of responses in the middle too. So it wasn't just the OpenSSF integrity group filling this out, giving us a very small slice. It was a much broader slice. There were persons from all over the world, a number of major regions. Europe actually had the most respondents, and a wide range of security postures. Some organizations where the persons admitted to having very little security consciousness, and some on the opposite spectrum. And all these details will be in the report that's published. It's actually supposed to come out tomorrow, I believe, fingers crossed. So you can see all the details there. There's a lot more about who took this survey. So I'm going to show you 3 slides that I consider the meat of this survey. And they're data rich, but I'm going to point out at least my broad observations on them, and then I'll open back up the questions and comments. So one is, what is the prevalence of these different practices? And you'll see a number of salsa related practices and then some non-salsa related ones. I'll just point out a couple things. One, there's a lot of variation. Some of them are common. For instance, centralized build service is over 50% of the respondents say they always do that. Some of them are less common, hermetic builds, for instance. So lots of variation. That's really the main takeaway here. Let me show you. I'm glad to come back to this slide too. Second is perceived helpfulness. The funny thing, or surprising thing really, is there's actually relatively surprisingly little variance among these answers. I'm not really quite sure why. But I think it's mostly a good story. You'll see that all the different practices, 50% of respondents at least said that these practices are extremely helpful or very helpful in their opinion. So I'd say it's an open door for most of these practices. You don't see a lot of pushback. Sure, there are some people who are on the more skeptical end, but they're minority. Melba has her hand up, I think.
Is there a relationship between the low adopters and the not helpful, not very helpful? Is there any sort of relationship there?
That's a good question. So there is. There is a strong relationship for any given practice between whether you view it as helpful or not and whether you adopt it or not. David Wheeler has rightfully pointed out, it's hard to know which direction this goes. Is it that people adopt it and therefore they kind of think themselves into thinking it's useful, they think it's useful and then adopt it? But it does exist in a statistically significant fashion for, I think, all of the practices. And I'll skip ahead to a finding and then there's a contrast. The interesting thing is that for the difficulty for all the practices, there's no relationship between the level of perceived difficulty and adoption, which is also surprising to me. It does seem like if you think it's more helpful, on average, you're more likely to adopt it. So it definitely points to the usefulness of messaging and communications related to explaining the usefulness of any particular practice if you want to encourage it. So I think it's kind of a good news story. Does that answer your question, Melba? Okay, cool. So I'll do one more. It's 12:52. Perceived difficulty. There's a lot of variation here again. I'll just point out the key thing that stands out to me is that hermetic builds and reproducible builds are perceived as much harder. I think this is consistent with the consensus that at least I've observed among salsa community members. That's not to say that is objective reality. Once again, it's only perceived difficulty. Melba, again.
Since this is based off of version 0.1, were you able to ask about the perceived difficulty because the lack of clarity in the requirements, or is it because it's hard to implement? Because there is a difference.
We weren't able to ask that, or we didn't ask that. We could have, we did not. So I can't untangle that for you, unfortunately.
That's fine.
So for me, the big takeaway is I think that it's actually mostly good news. If some of these had 0% adoption and were widely considered difficult, I would think that should be this group should be a little nervous about that. These things were perceived as foreign, exotic, obscure, esoteric, but that's just not the case. A lot of these have moderate adoption already, or even strong adoption. They're broadly perceived as useful. There is variation in how difficult they are perceived, and there's certainly lots of room to make these more widespread, don't get me wrong, but I think the picture could be worse. I will say that the one thing that sticks out, and this is based a little bit on some of the free text responses too, which are hard to summarize, but a little on the data, is that I think provenance as an idea has a ways to go. Not in that it's underdeveloped. I mean, there's lots of active development about discussion about what should be in provenance, but I think in terms of the PR and messaging campaign about provenance, it certainly points here in the survey results that provenance was actually considered the third hardest to implement, which might surprise some people in the salsa community. I think that's partially a messaging issue. And also, it was relatively less common as practiced in the prevalence. So, I joke here, could there be a provenance everywhere campaign? But and that's all I've got. I'm glad to take questions. Thanks so much, Melba, for hosting us.
Yeah, Thank you. I know I talked to Tracy about getting a preview of the results just to see if we need to put out some blogs. And there is a lot of good news. And I think maybe what we need to ask the community is, it's been a year almost since the survey. Does 1.0 help with the difficulty, with the awareness, or has the awareness increased? What else can we do to make it less difficult? So I think that this is good to see. I don't know if others on the team have any comments on what was shared.
Yeah, I mean, I think the survey purposes is good. I think all the changes that have occurred since this survey kind of, now you're dealing with a whole different sample. I mean, dare I say that the population, I guess, hell, the population might even be different, let alone the sample of the population that completed the survey. And then, of course, with all the changes, like for instance, there was still a level 4 when this survey was conducted. A level 4 of the framework before the split, right? Before the break off of the different tracks. So, I mean, like I said, I think as a foundational item, just to get a gauge, wonderful. I think the data points themselves are a bit outdated.
Yeah, that's, sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's certainly true. I mean, the spec is changing imminently. And I guess I would point out that the survey didn't specifically ask about levels. It didn't. So it broke it down by the different requirements or security practices. So my intention was that to make it more broadly useful than asking about difficulties and usefulness of SALSA 1, 2, 3, and 4. But everything you said is fair. The world's changing, and software supply chain security continues to evolve as a concept and field. So, and you know, the people of the world are changing. You're right. So all true.
So I'm curious. There's two questions. One is, I'm guessing that the surveys were anonymous, so there's no way to reach back out to the original participants to say retake it again a year, several months later, right? And then I guess the second question I have is there something we can do in terms of, can we have a pulse, like a pulse right now of those same metrics, those same questions? Can we do that to get that latest data and not have to wait, months and months for data? Because technology changes quickly. We don't have time, unfortunately, to wait 6 months, and then SALSA will be at level 2 or something, right?
Yeah, I think. Well, I guess I have two quick proposals. And I'm not saying anyone should take these seriously. These are truly just ideas. One is, it probably is possible to have quick pulse surveys that OpenSSF could run on a wide variety of software supply chain security topics to include SALSA. I mean, I would take this up with Jennifer and other members of the OpenSSF team, but that seems like it could be a broadly useful thing and not just to this group. And you can imagine working with partner organizations, a number of the companies here and others, to reach a wide network, and get a few hundred responses every 3 months or something like that. That seems like a cool idea. Second, there's another approach, but I think it's a little too technically difficult now. But I'd love to be told I'm wrong. Actually looking at software artifacts associated, especially with open source software repositories, and as SALSA becomes more widespread and mature, checking things like for SALSA badges, or even having a tool that checks for SALSA practices on open source projects could give another way of doing engage without doing a survey. But there are technical complications there.
Well, I know we are pretty much at time. So we didn't get to two of the things. I know OpenSSF Day CFP, does it close Friday? Is that right?
Yes, it definitely closes on Friday, so please be sure to get submissions in before then.
I for the group, I think the ketchup mustard relish of supply chain security, I feel like we need to submit that. Maybe it's not so much of a panel, but I think that is an important story to tell, right? We have a new mission scope that we're trying to do across the board. We have, S2, C2F since the last OSSNA, and now we have this positioning group. So I think we should submit that, and we would just kind of not do it as a panel form. It would be more, presentation form. So I don't know what the group thinks about that.
You're behind.
Thumbs up, thumbs down. Arno says good. I'm not seeing anything. So I'm, and I think actually there's some people that have probably dropped, that probably need to, thanks Jennifer, that need to vote. So I'll put it up on the Slack channel for people to thumbs up, thumbs down, but I think that would have a good chance of getting in. That was one of the first ones that were accepted. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining. Lots of to-dos. We'll Slack offline to try to get some of this stuff taken care of offline. Okay. Thanks everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.